Listeners, we have a very special treat for you today. We have not announced the new Flex Success Coach until this moment, until today.
We haven't even announced that we were getting one.
No, it's true. We haven't. We didn't even put out applications. We just thought George was so amazing. So I guess we've kind of ruined the punchline. New Flex Success Coach George. What did I call you? Jaws.
Well, it's actually Jorge, right?
Welcome to the podcast, George.
Thank you for having me on, guys. And I guess I've said it quite a few times now, but thank you very much for the opportunity to become a part of Flex Success. It really is an honour.
No worries, my bearded friend.
I feel a bit left out without a beard. And there was Will Crozier on the last episode with a beard.
Well, let's not tell everyone that Will Crozier has a beard.
A pathetic beard.
Will Crozier has some under chin fluff, and I can say that now as a man who's managed to grow a beard who previously used to be in this position.
But this isn't about beards or Will. This is about you, George.
It actually might be about beards.
Well, I hope this isn't about beards. George, I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about you.
So
Dean, no, this isn't about you. This is about George.
No, it's who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Who are you?
I was waiting for the punchline.
Sorry.
I am George. I'm a physique development coach from the UK. I have been coaching for 2.5 years now. It's been my main source of income, my sole profession for the last year when I went full time. A bit about why I started. I guess you cover a little sob story from when I was younger. The typical journey into bodybuilding, that normal sob story of feel sorry for me. Grew up as a kid. I was quite overweight. Borderline obesity. I had epilepsy as a kid, so I was on steroid medication, and I got very big, very, very quick at a young age. And typical secondary school years, obviously experienced a little bit of bullying and stuff, which led me to kind of go on my own journey of trying to get in shape, lose body fat, and not get picked on for looking like a cream cake. But yeah, eventually I found myself not just in a position where I was quote unquote skinny. I kind of went the other way, but I had people coming to me even from like the age of 16 asking me, hey, how have you lost so much weight? How have you got a six pack? And quite quickly and quite early on, I found I had a passion for helping others kind of navigate the shit that I'd had to deal with. And that's kind of where it started from for me in not necessarily coaching back then, but just helping others to achieve something that I had kind of embarked on my own. And I realized quite quickly how much of a minefield trying to lose weight actually is. Like the basics are the basics, but it can be very, very overcomplicated at the best of times, which kind of led me into, I've been training since I was 15 at my school gym. And bodybuilding was never like a thing for me as a growing up. I didn't look at pictures of Arnold and think, oh yeah, I want to be like that one day. I just kind of fell into it. And it's that typical question when I speak to other coaches and say, oh, what do you do? And you often give me the answer that they're a bodybuilder and an online coach. And when that same question is given to me, it's always the flip. Like I am a coach first. Even when I was younger, my passion was, I want to help you guys achieve something and be happy. That was the main aspect of what drove me into, I guess, where I've fallen to now.
So for those that don't know anything about your coaching or your goals for the future, who have you worked with and where do you want to go?
So I got my first coach when I was 19. I didn't really have any aspirations of, again, going too far into bodybuilding. I just wanted to see, hey, look, I did all this on my own. What can I do with the guidance of someone who knows more than me? Which ultimately didn't lead to me achieving what I thought it would. It led to quite a lot of health implications. I've always been quite experimental growing up. I've never been afraid to try different things. And I quite quickly went down the performance enhancement route. Quite young for most people. I mean, well, I say young around the world. In the UK, it's not so bad. If you look at our average, 19 is usually when most gym guys get into it, which led to a number of health implications that I then tried to correct myself. This was kind of like where I found my niche in physique development. And I quickly realized that I actually had a really good love and ability to understand quite complicated pharmacokinetics and pharmacology of certain substances and compounds that we use. And I found that my interest really solely lied in, okay, well, this is what the normal natural human body can do. what can happen if we leverage these variables here and kind of become that quote unquote superhuman? What can we achieve? I then started to outreach for better professional advice. I come across the likes of nutritionally and training wise, Dr. Eric Helms. I then quickly found on the PED side of things, Victor Black, which then led me to my current coach and mentor, Joe Jeffrey. And I could probably put a lot of my development and knowledge as a coach down to this last sort of year and a half, not just being coached by Joe, but also having him there as a one-to-one mentor to not necessarily give me the answers, but guide me in the right direction and say, right, here's the tools, here's the books, here's the literature, here's the studies. This is what you need to dive into. This is going to channel you in the direction of coaching physique athletes and competitors.
I love that's where the industry is going, because Dean and I have been in the industry some time now. Like, I was a PT for 10 years before I became a coach, and I've been a coach for some years now too. And it was very like old school trial and error. It's because that's what my training partner did. And I love that it's going down the like, actually read, like learn anatomy, like learn some biology, like let's figure this stuff out. How can we do this better? So that's awesome.
Yeah, I almost went the opposite to you in that I wasn't looking for a coach, because everywhere I looked in my early sort of years of development, all I saw were problems when I compared them to just baseline biology and physiology learned at university. It was like, you don't even know this bit. How the fuck could you know the next step, Because they're sure as shit not teaching anyone how to be a contest prep coach at university, obviously. So like I was almost like avoiding it and just seeking knowledge. Like you said, came across very similar people to you, have ended up in a very similar position. And that obviously I sought after Joe for my coach as well, which is really cool. It's a refreshing time of, I was going to say, time in this industry with individuals seeking knowledge from other people now.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people. There is a lot of people in the industry that moan about the direction I think bodybuilding and coaching in general is heading in, but I can't see a negative to the whole evidence-based approach. I'm not a complete 100% believer that this is the be-all and end-all, and that the old school bro science kind of, what we've experienced doesn't have some application. I think there's a line in the middle somewhere where the two cross over. But there's a lot of backlash from the direction it's heading in, and I struggle to see how the younger people coming up maybe putting a little bit too much emphasis in knowing why and not just doing. I can't see how that's a bad thing.
Well, I mean, maybe it's a difference in understanding of what evidence-based really means. Like, to me, it means what the book says, but it also means like anecdotal evidence, and it also means what that person can stick to, even if that like a little bit conflicts with the optimal.
So long as there's a do no harm or do the least as harm undertone to it.
Yeah.
To talk about Eric Helms again, I loved his approach, which is evidence informed.
Right.
As opposed to evidence based. We're not saying the paper says X, therefore you cannot do Y, but rather the paper says X, the empirical says Y. Maybe we can kind of mold these two together and make an informed choice. Understand the pros and cons, all that kind of jazz.
Yeah. So because you really like the pharmacology side of things, that is your passion for coaching, right? From my understanding.
Yes, yeah, to a degree. It makes me sound like I'm just a typical drug guy, but it's where the interest lies, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because that's for sure a space that you think you can again delve into helping people, or at least helping prevent people go down the wrong route, because it's so common, right?
That latter bit would be my answer there. So I went down the wrong route and quickly then realized I was making mistakes based off of prior guidance from someone who I looked up to, and then had to correct them myself. Failed with a couple, and then had to seek advice from someone who did know. I would like to negate that whole process for as many people as possible and be the guy that I went to for advice and help on how to correct the problems, or at least just not let people get to that point of having the problem in the first place. If the correct advice and knowledge is there in the first place, then we won't have where I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For people that aren't in the bodybuilding space and feel like, oh, steroids, it's, such a terrible thing to do. Sure. And we definitely are not encouraging them. And we're definitely not saying that every bodybuilder should take them. But within powerlifting, strongman and bodybuilding, there are particular spaces where it is an even playing field, because they're untested federation. So by no stretch of the imagination are we encouraging cheating, like, taking gear for natural competitions. We have actually refused to take on clients who compete in natural federations, but we know use gear. So yeah, just so we're really clear on our stance there.
Yes.
Yeah, because people are going to take drugs anyways, and we go for the safer use model.
There's much better ones to take as well than steroids.
Hey, there's better ones to take.
There's better ones to take than steroids if that's what the listeners are considering. Avoid.
It's true. I always find it hilarious when people mention roid rage, as if people take steroids and all of a sudden become like really angry.
I mean, look at me. I'm so angry.
He's such an angry guy.
I find it's a heightened emotional response. It's whatever personality traits you have. I feel they just accentuate it tenfold. I'm incredibly laid back that my mum and my missus refer to me as being practically horizontal. And ever since I made that jump, I kind of just went even more so that way. It's a big misdemeanor, I guess, with anyone who uses enhancements or steroids.
It's the same.
What do you mean?
It dials up the capacity to grow. It dials up personality traits.
Yeah, but is it like chicken or egg though? Because I wonder if people who like feel like they want to be big and tower over people, they're attracted to steroids, and then like they already have that personality to begin with.
There's also, nocebo potentially.
Yeah, that's true.
We obviously can't remove the knowing that the person is taking the drug, and if they have this prior expectation that it's going to make them feel like X, then they may go seeking that. And there's certain drugs that will even do that from a side effect profile. Like there's a whole thing. Like testosterone makes you more risk adverse too. Like that's sort of known. So like if you heighten that, you may make some slightly brasher decisions. There's a few things to it, but it's you don't really know. But on the whole, it's classified to be a non-existent side effect to steroids. Right. In that you take X, it causes rage.
Yeah. No. Now your experience with coaching clients in the past is with males and females, right?
Yes. Unintentionally, when I first kind of started looking into the female literature when I was working quite quickly when I was at 19, 20, I quickly realized how deep of a rabbit hole the female physiology is. And it wasn't until I was not necessarily forced, but I had to make a choice on coaching my partner out of post-show amenorrhea that it was, who do I trust to take over from this? Joe, but I've already got him here in the background. This is a perfect opportunity for me to really sink my teeth into it. An area that I was quite not avoidant of, but a little bit apprehensive to dive into because of how complicated it can be. I was kind of forced. Yes, yeah, I was forced to. And again, I stress this for people listening. It's not just something you can do. There's a lot of potential things that can go wrong with female physiology from a hormonal perspective if you just diet them without understanding truly what is going on underneath the hood. I was pushed into it, not forcefully, but I guess by choice, to correct her hormonal issues. And it just stemmed from there that I suddenly realized I had people coming from my local gym, females coming to me saying, hey, look, I've got this XY symptom. I've had this blood work done. And, can I have some advice? And over time, it's just developed further into, I guess I coach more females than I do males currently. So without it, unintentionally, it's landed there now.
But you still enjoy coaching males as well. It's just
100%. I have no preference there. I enjoy working with everyone, but I just stressed don't take on something unless you truly understand what is going on.
Let's pull on that thread a little bit, man. You mentioned that there's some considerations that people need to be aware of when coaching females, whether it be hormonally or other things. What are some of the sex differences you've experienced either in the literature or in application in regards to coaching women versus men? Or female,
the main elephant.
Coaching or fat loss? Or coaching for fat loss?
Coaching for fat loss or coming out of competition, or coaching into a contest prep, I guess, or a fat loss. Yeah, fat loss. Let's go fat loss.
Okay.
So the big elephant in the room is obviously the menstrual cycle. One thing that we as men do not have to deal with, thank the Lord, because we'd cry at the first instant.
It's not fun.
No, riding the dragon, as my missus calls it. Now, it houses its own problems when we look at females as a generalization. There is varying differences between one female cycle and another's female's quote unquote normal menstrual cycle. But then if we look at the same female from month to month, there can be variations in their menstrual cycle, length, intensity, duration, etc. And the fluctuations of the hormones are all, again, person dependent. Everyone has their own genetic individual response to that. And if, say for fat loss, if you push too far into an energy deficit, there is always the potential, as you're probably aware of dealing with female contest clients, that you will reach that amenorrhea state where the loss of female cycle occurs and the body would prioritize survival mechanisms over reproductive mechanisms and portion off and shut down the HPT axis. Now, this comes with a numerous amount of detrimental effects on cardiovascular health, your brain health, or the potential risk of osteoporosis, osteoarthritis later on in life if this little window of time is left unchecked for too long. So some main differences, I guess, would be in typically when we look at males and females, one thing to consider is that you are dealing on average with a lot smaller individual. This may not be particularly a gender bias, but coaching females usually means you're dealing with a lot smaller human being, a lot less lean body mass, and therefore, say a male may be starting their fat loss phase at 3,000 calories, just a rough idea, and maybe a female that's 60 kilos, maybe starting her prep at say 1,800. The runway you have to land them in that deficit and to get them to the goal is a lot less. You could take away 1,000 calories from the man at 3,000. It not be too much of a problem. You take that away from the female and you're going to hit a wall very, very quickly. So you have to be cautious in your timeline. You have to be cautious in your approach and maybe implementing diet breaks or refeeds a lot more frequently with a female compared to a male. Something to consider physically between females and males is body fat patterning. Typically males hold more fat on their upper body, particularly like visceral areas, so around the organs and stuff. Females tend to hold it more lower body. This is predominantly because of the anticipation of pregnancy from puberty to menopause. But that fat is usually held within the subcutaneous layer. So typically females on average compared to men have more total body fat. So you may be looking at a longer duration of prep or just a longer duration of fat loss when you compare between the two, something to take into consideration. The response to a calorie deficit as well is something to consider. Females, so the hunger hormones, ghrelin and leptin, females' response to fat loss is that there is a much greater leptin response, which is the hunger hormone that signals to the brain roughly like the calories you're intaking and how much body fat you have when leptin is released from fat cells. This is excruciatingly higher in females than it is in males. So hunger signaling during that fat loss phase will be a lot more, a lot more. And anecdotally, we'd see on my clients, on my behalf, the complaints that you'd normally get from Gen Pop, competitors alike, they're struggling. You think it's just females moaning, as some people would say, but it's generally down to a physiological response. Like they have a lot more hunger signaling being triggered, and that isn't necessarily something they can control. It's just something that happens, and you have to cope and manage that. But that also leaves potential for eating disorders to be more prominent in the female population than the male because of their response to this hunger signaling. This could, if not controlled or watched and managed, lead into potential binge eating disorders, that binge restrict cycle. So it's important when you're coaching a female to not just be so, here's your diet, here's your training plan, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at the physical data. How about we ask how you're feeling? Let's how you felt after this meal. If they have a refeed, how was you for the next 2 days? Like, how did you feel about food? And coming at them from an emotional perspective as well as a physical. I find it's kind of hard to get that out of a man anyway. We're usually quite stubborn on that front, avoid of our emotions to a degree. Do we?
Yeah, I don't know.
Put me in front of a child singing a musical and I'll cry.
If tired's an emotion. Yeah. There's a really go on.
So the biggest thing that I guess separates the two is if you like pull out and come back to like the basics. If we wind the clock back to caveman era, what is the purpose of this is going to sound so sexist. We're in 2022. I really don't want this to come across the wrong way. But what is the purpose of a man and what is the purpose of a female? and it is to reproduce. And the man has one job really, and he's pretty much useless outside of that. And the female has to prepare to have a baby. So predominantly from puberty to menopause, their hormones are governed by this biological survival mechanism to hold more body fat in preparation for having another child, to consume more calories and be a hell of a lot more resistant to those adaptations of fat loss for that reason. They don't want to lose fat because that goes against their whole entire biological makeup, what they're intended for. Obviously in 2022, that's not the case. You can do what you want with your life. I don't want to get into that debate. But yes, there's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
Outside of what men are predictable, we are really, really predictable. From one month to the next, we are pretty consistent.
That's my dream. That is my dream. I don't want to have children. And so every time I get my period, I feel like it's such a waste of hormonal health. I'm like, why is this happening to me every month? I don't need you.
She's like, let's just get a hysterectomy. I'm like, yeah, but then that comes with some additional, it's the same issues that you mentioned before, right? So
yeah. So what we're going to do is just like chop out the bit when you said like men are good for one thing and women just have babies, and just so you get hate mail sent to your house.
The 60-second snippet is women have one job.
Oh, man, a lot of what I've learned on the female physiology come from Lyle McDonald. I don't know if you're in his Facebook group, but some of how he comes across in videos is so blunt and so straight to the point that you can take it the wrong way if you don't just take a little step back for a minute. Seen some comments from females. You
got to read everything from Lyle as if he's having a bipolar episode.
Lyle's an interesting guy, isn't he? But anyways, getting back to your point there, I really liked your point about, managing women more closely with their relationship with food, because the last thing we want is to cause harm and then they develop an eating disorder in the process. And one thing worth mentioning is like, I'm not a comp prep coach. I coach general population, Gen Pop. But even with my experience coaching men and women, I've also come across a similar situation. And there's so much more harm in a woman going, fuck it, I'm just going to eat this pizza, than there is in a man. Because for Dean to start gaining body fat, you're going to have to eat in excess of what? Anything above 4,000 calories, you'll start to gain a little bit, right? Anything for me above 2,000 calories, I'll start to gain fat. So if Dean eats a pizza, he might still end the day around his maintenance calories. I eat a pizza, I'm in a surplus. I do that for multiple days, I'm fucked. So there's really like more harm to be done in a female just having a fuck it moment than there is in a man.
100%. Also on that response going down through the deficit, that the negative adaptations that the body's fighting, it's the same on the way back out for a female. They adapt a lot quicker to that. So their ability to gain fat is a lot quicker than a man on average coming back out the other side. So like you said, on them days where you have the fuck it moments and you do eat way too much, the damage done sadly is a lot more on the female front than it is on the male front, again from a physiological standpoint, not just your total calories in, but the body is adapting a hell of a lot quicker.
Yeah, the greater propensity to store fat per unit of calories in the surplus, Now, all of this sounds kind of scary for the girls. But what I wanted to sort of say is that this is the beauty of having a coach that at least understands these baseline things, because like we used that terminology before, evidence informed, it means the coach can plan out and periodize and allow for periods to break and allow for periods to not have so much stress and allow for periods.
Yes.
It's not that it's scary, it's that it's informed so that you can do this in the healthiest manner possible. And then for someone who's not in a contest prep, the most sustainable manner possible.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. The starting point, like on average for females and males, is another good one to look at. That our kind of average range, again, this is an average, not person to person, is for men body fat from like I think it's 12 to 15%, women 18 to 24. Like for us to exhibit similar, because men will exhibit similar symptoms from like a hunger signaling perspective, and that the deficit damage will happen to us at some point, but it's not until we get a lot closer to, say, them single digit numbers of percentage. For females, you see that straight from the off. Once they drop under their favored body fat composition, that's it. Boom, you're in at the deep end. You're going to start exhibiting these symptoms. One anecdotally that I noticed for the variance between female to female here is my missus on her last prep. She lost her menstrual cycle 2 weeks into a deficit. This was back when she was natural. 2 weeks, it was all it took before she was meant to have her period, and it just didn't come. And then I told her to track it, and it just never come after that. She went 13 months without a menstrual cycle before I then said, no, enough's enough. Let me jump in and try and fix this.
Well,
Yeah, far
and
out.
how many of those 13 months were post-comp?
She spent, oh my God, don't. She spent 4 months post-comp, right? And she was, okay, this is a note for females coming out the back of maybe contest prep. Do not let someone tell you to reverse diet to keep you looking good. That is not a thing. The goal is recovery.
Diet for people that just aren't familiar, mate?
Sorry?
Could you define maybe a reverse diet coming out of a contest prep, just so people are familiar?
Okay, the typical reverse diet is seen as a method of keeping you Instagram worthy, as I call it. So once you've got in stage condition, as you come out, you start increasing calories very, very, very. I've seen some stupid increments, like 5 to 10 calories and stuff per week from some people. It's a joke. But the idea is that you would increase calories really, really, really slowly, so that when you come out of the prep, you maintain and hold your condition for as long as possible. That's the concept there. But the point that they're missing is that maintenance, when you come out the back of a calorie deficit, is here. And you're just staying in a deficit the whole way through until you get to your baseline here, where you're going to start to see those positive adaptations occur, and you'll start to get back to homeostasis. So that the reverse diet is just an elongated way of becoming healthy again.
So instead of getting healthy in a few weeks, you're stretching it out over a few months, and you're stretching out the symptoms over a few months instead of clearing them out in a few weeks. Yeah.
Again, the purpose of returning back to maintenance, you're going to recruit some fluid and some body fat, but ultimately maintenance is there to keep you maintained at whatever body fat composition you are. By taking longer to get to there, you're not, by getting to here quickly, you're not going to do anything different than what you've done in these 6 months, but in a month.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just jump in and talk to the listeners about the difference between a reverse diet and a recovery diet, and where a recovery diet might actually be appropriate. So once somebody has competed, they need to recover from all of the negative adaptations that they're experiencing, like the extreme fatigue, the hunger, the loss of menstrual cycle, things like that. They want to recover from that, which is why George is suggesting going pretty much straight back up to maintenance. And yes, some body fat will be maintained. A reverse diet might be appropriate for somebody who has gone from overweight to a healthy body fat percentage. They were in a deficit that whole time, and now they're moving to a weight maintenance phase, which is very different from getting on a bodybuilding stage. They might go from a deficit, and they might reverse their calories up slowly to reduce the risk of fat gain when while they find their new maintenance. Would you define it any differently?
No, yeah, that's exactly right. The caveat being is that the post-comp phase individual is still negatively being impacted by their body fat and their diet.
Yeah.
Whereas the person who's gone through the fat loss phase to now sustain it arguably could be in a somewhat healthier state physiologically for some things. It's just that they're trying to manage the hunger and the other things that are slightly off because they've dieted moderately relative to a contest prep.
Yeah. So somebody getting on a bodybuilding stage, the goal was never to look like that forever, right? They're quite unhealthy. They're extremely lean. Their life is really restricted. The goal is to win a trophy, look good for one day, and then get back to health. Very different set of circumstances.
Yep.
Yeah, I should have. I said, for contest prep people, a reverse diet should never be applicable. But there is efficacy for it elsewhere when you're not pushing yourself to the extremes of negative health effects that we would in a contest prep setting. 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
And for girls that are suffering from amenorrhea or other forms of menorrhea issues post-comp, is that your primary sort of focus for most of them? It's about re-establishing healthier body fat levels, or is it about re-establishing calorie position, or what do you think are the most important factors for them to consider here?
I think firstly, the first port of call would be to returning their hormones back to their relative homeostatic balance. Outside of that, you could then look at, right, let's get you back to a comfortable position within your caloric intake, because then you're going to have more freedom to be able to macro track more efficiently and have some degree of normality back in your life post comp. So yeah, 100% calories is something that you should consider getting back into as high a state as is efficient in regard to where you're at compositionally. 100%.
Yeah, this is the other thing too with the recovery diet. This doesn't necessarily mean that you should be eating an excessive amount of calories to regain body weight. Because you mentioned before, the high propensity to gain fat in the post-comp phase, even more so for women, is that an uncontrolled overfeeding phase potentially runs the risk of creating new sites of fat cells.
Yes, yeah. So collateral fattening is definitely a risk. The flip side of it, recruiting the body goes through that process of not really knowing where to store this insane amount of fat that it's now got to store, and thus it can't fill up the fat cells you already have, so it will create new ones. And fat cells are not something we lose in a deficit. It's not that you go into a caloric deficit and fat cells get removed. They stay, they just get smaller. So collateral fattening or the production of new adipose tissue is not something we want to be running into. There's a fine margin for error with the recovery.
From a caloric standpoint, you mean? Yeah.
But I mean, this would be very different to a male doing a recovery diet, would it?
Men can get away with a lot more than females. There are still instances where males particularly would shut off to the same degree as a female in terms of their hormone production. It's not impossible. It's not unheard of. But a general overview of it is that we don't necessarily completely shut off unless you are actual stage lean, which not many people do get in the early years of competing, and especially not some natural competitions. Some natural competitors do get to that point, but males, we tend to restart our HPTA a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently than females would. And again, like I said, the chances of us actually getting to that point in comparison to a female, like I said, Zoe was 2 weeks into a deficit and hers went. Males will, that could be said for females as well. I hate to generalize so much because it's such an individual concept. There are females that I know that have a menstrual bleed literally the week before peak week, that they're still optimally functioning. So it's not, this is the case. It's very, very individual, and you have to understand yourself and your body and manage it accordingly. Again, another reason why you need a coach to keep an eye on things and track every aspect of your life during that time. But again, men, we don't seem to have such a negative response or as aggressive response to going into a calorie deficit.
Yeah, I find that individual variation or variability between females and the menstrual cycle is so interesting, because the same, I had some girls that would lose it within like 6 weeks of dieting, and I'm like, you're still on a lot of food, and they would take every time, they wouldn't return it until they basically got back to within 5% of their previous stage weight. It was So every time we tried to slow it up a little bit because she wanted to sit a little bit leaner this time because she got a pro card and thought I need to adhere to a certain look. And it was like, it's been 2 months. I'm sorry, time to eat some food. And then there's other girls, like I've heard of girls that are on sub 1,000 calories at 45 kilos, peeled, and still functioning perfectly normal. This is what women are highly resistant, but very resilient. I refer to them a lot. Like, it blows my mind that they're resistant to a lot of things in regards to fat loss and changes, the ease of it and all that sort of stuff. But the resilience, if you just beat the shit out of them, is far greater than a man. Like, if you can give a man the same amount of training volume as you can give a female, ask them to eat in the same level of a deficit, ask them to do the same amount of output, and also do everything else they need to do in a day, they will whinge and cry and moan. And then the girls just are like, yep, no worries, like, it is what it is.
They get it done.
If you looked at like extreme starvation of a female compared to a male, which ultimately a part of what contest prep is taking it to that extreme. You can draw it back to that original statement of the caveman in the cave. The female's ability to put up with the starvation is a lot higher because of the caveat that they have another life to look after. Their ability to take the shit is a lot higher when you look at it from back at that perspective. Whereas the man, you got yourself to worry about.
There some interesting studies on pain thresholds showing that women that have given birth have like a 50% higher pain threshold or something like that?
Yeah, it's pain on a gender basis seems to be somewhat the same up until the point that a female has given birth, whereby their pain threshold is exponentially larger than a male's.
Yeah.
Super, super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically we're the superior gender is what this is the conclusion of this podcast.
From a pain perspective, yes. From
an everything else perspective, I lose.
Metabolic perspective.
I have not hit
so
the
much.
jackpot.
Also, you've just got one job to do. Okay?
Shut up, Tim. I'll
You
just
don't even want to.
be your own admin.
One job in life, 10 jobs in the kitchen.
Far out. All right, cool. So would you say that a general statement would be, do you think this is true, coaching men is easier?
More predictable. I don't know if easy is the right statement.
Okay.
I've come across
Qualify that answer. Because I think I agree.
Do you?
Yeah.
Predictable as in I know how a male is going to respond from month to month if they do X, Y, and Z. But I often find that the ego clash from a man to a man gets in the way sometimes, that they do tend to think they know better. I don't know if that's a general conception. Maybe we're all like that, but that's where I find the difficulty with men. It's not in what should be happening X, Y, and Z if I do A, B, and C. It's their ability to do what I've asked. When a female gets a diet plan through, they get instructions of the approach for the next 6 to 8 weeks. No issues, ticking off the boxes most of the time. Males, I tend to see anecdotally give me more. This went wrong. This happened. I did this day because I kind of wanted to do this. And okay, you pay me for a job. But...
What do you think?
I would tend to agree for the majority of the time.
Yeah.
My experience with female competitors that are for sure biased to my style of coaching. So we've got to appreciate here the female competitors that are coming to somebody who's very like education dominant in their approach, I guess you could say, not very bro. Like they're interested in your opinion. They're interested in the nuance. They are just very much a, hey, yep, thanks boss, no worries. Lock and load, I can do more work if you want me to do more work, I don't need the refeed if you don't want to give it to me, like that kind of stuff. Whereas the men are more inclined to be like, it's been 5 days of dieting. Like, don't suppose I'm going to get a refeed because, all that negative adaptation that's happening. And I'm like, oh, God.
Yes.
Yeah. But, men are far more predictable in that I can pretty much lay out a plan and that plan can almost go to the T the whole time if the person just executes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. We don't have that thing lingering in the background that makes us inconsistent and change every month, sadly.
The major difference I think I find though, and this is probably a moral issue of my own, is that I find it easier to push a male to the limits knowing that his return to baseline or the fact that they're using exogenous hormones is going to offset some of those adaptations a lot easier. Whereas a female, when I'm like, oh, I really don't want to have to push you here, but you have to because you have this extreme goal, I have a harder time doing that as the coach. Purely because I know of the detriment to that individual, but then I also know I can fix it pretty quickly. So like
100% agreed. Knowing that you can redeem that situation definitely helps. One thing I notice is whereabouts along that journey they lose their menstrual cycle also has an effect on how I feel, because the longer they're in that state of little to no hormones, I know that there's potential damage being done that could be long term here. The longer we're in this state, the worse it is. So if they was 12 weeks out and it went, that's going to linger in the back of my head the whole way through this natural prep. Okay, we need to get you done out of this as quick as possible. Whereas if they lose it 2 weeks out, that's 2 weeks of damage, and then we can get back into recovery. And I think from a ethical standpoint, it sits a little easier. A part of the reason why I enjoy working with enhanced females as well is that, it's a big discussion we'd like us to go into. We'd be here for about 3 hours. But that ground base is that, if you're a repetitive competitor, maybe HRT, not super physiological, but maybe HRT is technically the safer approach if you're going to be competing for 5-10 years every single year, like most females do.
Yeah, that's a podcast for another time for sure.
Perhaps. But if it doesn't feel any better as a female who has lost her cycle because I've been too lean at points in time, I love it.
I was going to say, right, here's the caveat.
I love not getting my period.
There are some girls that chase not getting it because they know it makes the prep easier.
Because when you have your period, you have like these huge peaks in hunger and these huge crashes in energy. And it just makes like ticking the daily tasks so much harder with those hormonal fluctuations. So when I get too lean and I start getting my period, like I know it's not the healthiest thing. It's not for long periods of time, like I might be doing a photo shoot or something like that, but it does make things easier.
Yeah. I want you took the words out of my mouth, George, and that it was, if I had a female that lost her cycle very early on, the discussion is going to go pretty much as follows. Like, this is not ideal, but this seems to be your genetically unique response. We have to have a conversation about how fast we get you out of this, because total exposure time to no menstrual cycle is my biggest concern, right? So I'm not willing to spend 10 weeks post-comp getting it back, And then I'm like, but this is an advantage to us somewhat in that it's going to make this prep a little bit more predictable. So let's just bury in on that and take the wins, knowing X afterwards, right? And then it's the other individuals that they don't lose it. It's like, cool, we can probably play a little bit of a safer route out, or a slower route out should you choose to. And you have a little bit more like malleability to your approach post-comp. But the take home there for girls is that if you are losing it early and that discussion is not being had or not even being tracked, then you should probably ask more questions with your coach.
Yeah, definitely. I've had females come to me before from prior coaches, not for competitive purposes, but even Gen Pop, and they I say to them, have you got an app that you track your menstrual cycle on, or is it something that we can just put in place physically so that I have an area on the check-in sheet so you can tick it off and say when it starts, etc., when bleeding finishes, just so that we can track it. And they look at me really funny on the consultation and are like, why do you need to know this? Why didn't your previous coach explain this?
Mm-hmm.
That should be something you're quite familiar with. Obviously, if you've never been coached before, then you're going to have the conversation about, we do need to know this stuff that is quite personal to you. But yeah, I can't see how coaches don't track it.
That's an interesting question for you. Before I mentioned that you can get this like nocebo effect of a man who believes that testosterone is going to make him rage, he takes it, therefore he rages within 2 days, right? Have you ever found discussing the menstrual cycle with an individual who otherwise never really paid attention to it has heightened their expectations of fluctuation, changes, hunger, fatigue? Like, has it changed how they've been coached?
If we go into detail about the symptoms, they may be, if we really dive into the menstrual cycle, then yes, I 100% notice that they come to me and go, oh, hey, I think it's this point right here with my cycle. It's like, yeah, well, you don't really know unless you're tracking it with some scientific machine that you're logged up to. But yeah, 100% is that placebo effect, I guess, in the background. They notice their hunger signaling a lot more. They notice they're more tired, particularly when they're coming into that PMS area at the end of the cycle. Yeah, 100% agree.
Have you ever noticed that?
Well,
I suppose he's quite aware anyway.
Not so much for yourself, but for other people.
For my clients, I ask them to, tell me when it starts and finishes.
You don't delve into expectations or anything?
Not really. No.
I think actually from a coach's perspective, for a coach who's listening, this is a bit of a learning curve. I think this is like one of those classic cases of if you think other people are interested in knowing sometimes, and you can over-coach and over-educate to the point that it either makes them confused or it makes them seek trying to find problems.
Yeah.
So like I've done in the past where I'm like, hey, I want to track your menstrual cycle for the following reasons. And then all of those reasons just start magically appearing out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Whereas if I just say, hey, here's my sheet, put a number 1 in there when it's day 1, and then color code it for the days of bleeds. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. Mm-hmm. And then nothing comes of it, And then I just look at the subjective feedback and line it up and go, oh, these are some interesting trends.
Well, this is similar to like if a client is starting an aggressive cut, I might not want to say, hey, what you might expect is extreme hunger. You might be tired all the time. Your food-seeking behaviors might go up. You might be mentally preoccupied with food all the time because they'll be like, oh, really? Is that what I'll experience? Okay. And it could make the cut much harder. Whereas if I was to say, hey, on Monday, we're going to start the cut. It's going to be 2 weeks. You're a hard worker. You got this. Go. They might not even notice all of those things that I mentioned, and then maybe if they come with me with I don't want to say complaints, but with symptoms like, hey, Liz, this is what I'm experiencing, then you could say, oh, that's actually really normal. whatever.
Yeah.
But you don't want to set someone up to look for those things.
Have done that though.
What?
Set someone up, backfired on me bad.
Yeah. Look,
Yeah.
learn.
100%. It's the have it when you do like a one-off consult call for a specific purpose. It's great 'cause you can dive into it. You can really let your brain go, start talking about the X's and O's, because the client who's on that call wants to know this information. But when you're doing just a normal coaching call, it's being able to turn that brain off for a minute and say, right, what does this person actually need to know? What do they want to know? What are they asking me for here? And not trying to, like I said, just overwhelm them with all this knowledge and things that, again, are going to lead to placebo effect later on.
Yeah. Well, that's the beauty of coaching. Like the client just inputs the data and then you do all the understanding and computing.
Yeah.
On that point, George, you're obviously available for coaching, where we've hired you as a comp prep coach, but of course there's some space for Gen Pop, but for the majority, it's comp prep clients. And you're also available for once-off consultation calls. If somebody wants to talk about all things physique, training, nutrition, PEDs.
Yep. All that.
Yeah, exactly. And we hope to get on the podcast again. Yeah, go on.
I've made a big focus on the performance enhancement side of things here, but I do have just as a passion for training and nutrition as well. I'm not just the drug guy, just to clarify that.
Of course. Yeah. We can see that the bodybuilding space is a growing space, and we want to play a part in making sure that people stay as safe as possible. And one way that we can do that is by taking on awesome people like yourself that really contribute to making sure people don't kill themselves.
Yeah, the contest prep space still needs a lot more evidence-informed coaches like yourself, us at Flex, and the crew that we all associate with. How funny is that? I'm wearing the Physique Collective shirt today, which is Joe's crew.
I took the hoodie off before we started the call.
Well, I'm wearing a Flex shirt.
You got a Flex shirt.
Represent.
So, yeah. It's refreshing to have more. It was a difficulty of us to try and find someone we thought was suitable. I think anybody who's listening to this can know that Flex doesn't take on people that we don't trust and do as good of a job, if not better, than what we do ourselves. So we've got a lot of trust, a lot of faith, and a lot of excitement associated with bringing you on board, mate. So I'm really keen to see clients flourish under your guidance.
That's actually the reason we didn't put out an application for coaches for this position, that we've been looking for someone for a while. We just had no confidence that anyone was out there that could cover training, nutrition, client relationships, PEDs, could be a team player. We just sort of threw our hands up. And but then George, this strange shaped person that fit the strange shaped hole.
You know what it was though? It's because he started following my core recipe, and I thought the guy knows.
I did your egg whites cream and rice the other day. Texture, 12 out of 10.
Yeah, see?
So if anyone wants cream of rice recipes, on Dean's personal Instagram on his highlights, he's been asked that many times to save it as a highlight. I personally can't be bothered spending that long cooking a meal. But look, if you've got nothing better to do.
The quick method's great. But if you really want to burrow in and get for anyone that's had a Japanese cheesecake consistency core with egg whites.
Oh, you're really talking to the minority of listeners here. I don't think anyone listening has had a Japanese cheesecake.
If anyone's listening hasn't had a Japanese cheesecake, save up a couple $1,000, go to Japan, get the cheesecake. It's worth it.
You're such an idiot. I don't think anyone's doing that.
Don't do it if you want a cheesecake, though, because it's nothing like
it's not like a cheesecake. George, I'm going to ask you some wrap-up questions. Are you ready?
No, but yes.
You got to be.
I've heard some of these ones before.
Did you hear the one I asked Joe? The would you rather I asked Joe?
No, I got halfway through the episode with Joe. I was halfway through that one. That's the one I'm on at the moment.
And you got bored and then left?
Because of Joe, though.
It's Joe. I listen to Joe's voice all the time. I've been my day now.
We start the wrap-up questions with a be less shit tip. When we remember, George, we start with a be less shit tip.
When we're being less shit.
When we're being less shit. If you had to leave the listeners with one tip on how they could be less shit, what might that be?
Specific to maybe what? Gender differences in fat loss?
Sure.
Sex differences, sorry.
Well, no, it could be like all Greg Knuckles. Remember Greg Knuckles' Be Less Shit tip? It was call your grandparents because old people are really lonely. I was like, what does that have to do with anything? I think he just misunderstood. Anyways, but whatever.
That definitely makes less shit, 100%. Time. My Be Less Shit tip is time. Do not underestimate how long it will take for you to make substantial change within your physique, whether you're male, female alike. Be ready to invest 30, 40, 50 weeks, maybe even a year of your time to getting in good shape consistently and slowly with the right approach. Don't think these 6-week rapid fat loss programs are going to work, because in the event that you are in that other 50% and you are a female, it could come with some negatives.
But if you do want to purchase our 6-week, code is George20.
We also have a discount. I love it. Okay. Do you have something worth sharing, George?
I think on the topic of, well, for females, I think there's not enough digestible knowledge out there for females without overcomplicating things. And I think probably one of the pioneers for making it a little bit easier to understand would be Lyle McDonald and his Woman's Book, Volume 1. I think that is probably not necessarily a beginner's place to start, but if you are interested in understanding your own body a little bit better and some of the processes that are going to happen, I think that is a good place to start. He has tried to, you can't oversimplify science to the degree that it becomes wrong. But I think he's done a very, very good job there.
He's also done a good job at having a lot of spelling errors and typos in the book.
That's so bad, eh?
100%. Yeah. There's a couple of times I read it. I have to reread the sentence 3 times.
Are you sure
am I dumb, or is this not been edited?
Yeah. In the first 10 pages, I was like, he's just got that, like, the book is thick, it's small text, and it's like A4 size, right? There's a lot in there.
It's also pink.
Yeah.
Girls.
Again, he said you got to take Lyle with a bit of a grain of salt.
But did you see how he marketed the book? He got, like, I don't know, hundreds of dollars worth of pads and tampons.
Yes, that's right.
He lay down on the ground in front of the pads and tampons, like, paint me one of your French girls. And that was his, like, banner image to promote the book.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
I remember him asking somebody for advice on, like, a graphic designer or something. He's like, I'm going to make the book pink, and this is what it's going to look like. Or he asked for a text, and then someone just said, I don't think you should make it pink for the, and he's just like, listen here, fucktard. I didn't ask you for your opinion on what it looks like. I asked you for your opinion on this. And I was like, oh, shit.
That's what Lyle's like, a real douchebag, but smart guy.
Great.
If you ever put anything into his Facebook group, be very cautious to be criticised in a very aggressive manner.
I will never comment on that group.
No, never. I won't. I'm a spectator. I'm there to watch and learn.
I'm terrified of Lyle, actually.
Does have 2 very good pit bulls, though.
Oh, no excuse for being a dickhead, though.
No.
Right. Would you rather? Are you ready for your would you rather?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Would you rather have a period yourself every month for the rest of your life and all the symptoms and fluctuations that come with it?
For the rest of his life, okay.
Well, okay, no, up until the point that you actually hit menopause.
Mm-hmm.
Say, do I want to hear that?
Menopause. All right, so you have to deal with that. Or get another job and never be able to coach people again.
That's tough.
Do I have to listen to people cry about eating pizza midweek? All that stuff.
I mean, if you're a pizza delivery boy, probably not. They might be like, I love eating pizza.
I mean, I'll take the periods and carry on coaching. At least that way, if I eat a tub of ice cream and cry like I do most weekends anyway, it's acceptable because I'm having a period.
The cry or the ice cream?
Both.
Both.
Well, he's like, well, I am watching something sad. That's why I'm eating ice cream.
I watch rom-com.
Joe doesn't believe in a Rimadex, so, I can't help it anyway.
Do you cry in movies, George?
No, it depends. If it's about an animal, human beings, I am really, really quite unemotional in regard to, but when it's an animal, I will cry. If there's anything sad, like Marley and Me, like that's me done.
I may have picked somebody a bit too similar to me.
That's true.
Like people, fuck them.
I don't actually think you're that empathetic to animals though, because we've been watching a lot of
Depends,
Anthony Bourdain's, what is it, Parts Unknown, his travel documentary series. And there's a lot of slaughtering of animals, like eating things while their heart's still beating and like chopping
witchcraft.
Just like a whole, and then I can't watch it. I literally have to turn it off and walk away. And Dean's like, no, you're just watching. Like, I don't think you're that empathetic to animals.
Yeah, but Marley and Me is like a sad story about a family dog died.
But we're talking generally. That was one example.
But we're talking about movies.
Okay, all right. So apparently it doesn't count
So
that Dean has no feelings towards animals because it's not a made-up.
Emotionally driven storylines will get me on animals.
Okay.
But when it's like a part of the culture where those people have done that for all of their life, I just look at it for what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, it's probably more sustainable than what we do with mass production.
Yeah.
Sure. But it doesn't make me less empathetic to the animals because it's better to the environment.
Yeah, like Liz would.
I'd probably have a panic attack if you made me sit there and watch it.
No, but even if you stood on an ant or a cockroach, you're like, oh.
Yeah.
You know.
They don't deserve to die just because I'm a big floppy human that can't control my feet.
Floppy human. Boneless floppy human.
You know?
Oh, so he's until he hits 40 to 50 and
then he gets menopause. All right. Well, you survived your first episode. It was really fun talking to you.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. This is quite a high level playing field for me because most of the people I've looked up to over the last 5 years of me getting into coaching have all been on this podcast. So it's quite a big thing for me, to be fair. I was sat here nervously sweating before I come on. Like,
Hence the tank top.
Hence the tank top. Well, it's so great to have you on the team, George, and I look forward to seeing the quality of clients that you bring on stage and working with you for, don't know, however many years there are to come. Yeah, yes. I suppose so. All right, guys, if you liked the episode, please, what's it called? Rate us?
No, yeah. You can give us 5 stars on Apple iTunes.
5-star rating, yep.
A thumbs up on YouTube.
Subscribe to our channel. Screenshot and tag us.
On IG, yep.
Yeah. And
we're a team. We're doing this right now.
We suck at this part, can you tell? But you will see George announced as the new coach on the Flex Success page today, the end of March 2022, which is when the podcast is being released.
Right, that really confused me because I'm like, it's not the day it is.
No.
It's in life.
The day that this gets released, it will be the end of March 2022. All right, everyone. I'll see you in the next episode.
Cheers.